wanted to talk more generally about left and right because you made a point that I thought was really interesting, which is that people a little bit off of the main beat sometimes have trouble getting their voices heard and worry about getting marginalized. For example, the Democratic Party did your man dirt. They really did dog him out.
Correct.
And
it's still going. Have you heard about this latest with Senator Nina Turner in Ohio's 11th district race?
Well, if I didn't know who Anita Turner was, my wife would divorce me. Nina Turner. If I did not know who she was, my wife would divorce me. She's had her eye on her for years. But tell us about her.
Yeah, the Democratic Party is no friend to the left. So as you mentioned, they were roundly unfair to Bernie Sanders both in 2016 and 2020. This is not leftist conspiracy to say that when he won the first 3 primaries, which some people will dispute if you're one of the 10 people in America that was a vociferous supporter of Pete Buttigieg, but after he won the first 3 primaries, including Nevada, which is a diverse state in which he won 70% of the Latino population, there was a mass dropout of all of the other candidates. Obama is reported to have picked up the phone and called everybody to say, let's drop out, let's rally behind Joe Biden and let's do this. And you had people like Soledad O'Brien saying, he won Nevada, no big deal. Let's see when he wins a diverse state. As though the Latinos don't live there, don't matter. It's a little bizarre her being Afro-Latina herself. But that's the kind of framework we were in. They tried to red scare Bernie right after Nevada because they got so frightened and said that Putin was helping him win the election. All of this stuff, it gets memory hold, but all of this stuff happened, right? Okay, there was the whole Elizabeth Warren shivving, all of that happened. But it goes on. So something happened this week that has caused a lot of leftists to say, this is it, we're done with the Democratic Party altogether. I personally don't identify as a Democrat. Bernie Sanders was an independent, and that mattered to me. But Senator Turner, who was one of Bernie Sanders' 4 campaign co-chairs, ran last year to replace Marcia Fudge's seat in the district that's basically Cleveland, Ohio. Marcia Fudge joined the Obama administration and left a midterm vacancy. In that race, Senator Turner, we call her Senator Turner because she was a state senator some years back. She has a long history in the district, very well liked in the district, was a professor at Cuyahoga Community College, a graduate of that college, has a real personal hard knock story that a lot of people relate to. She was ahead of the polls. Everything was going along swimmingly when her opponent, which seems to have been just kind of picked from the ether by the Democratic Party, you're hard-pressed to find her speaking anywhere on the internet, saying anything, believing anything, has no real identity before any of this, gets a huge influx of money that catches her up to Nina Turner, who'd been leading in fundraising up until that point, from a variety of groups that historically donate to Republican candidates. No progressive allies here. And in the final stretch gets endorsements from all the favorite Democrats there are, people like Jim Clyburn and Hillary Clinton. And she narrowly squeaks out a victory over Nina Turner. Now, Nina Turner's running again because it was a special election. Now there's the real election this year. It's coming up, I think, on May 3rd.
Okay.
The Congressional Progressive Caucus, led by Pramila Jayapal, who was for Bernie Sanders, most of the, all of the squad members and the CPC for Bernie Sanders surrogates, all of that. Ro Khanna was another co-chair, CPC. They just endorsed Shontel Brown, Nina Turner's opponent, over Nina Turner. Now, Shontel Brown wasn't even a member of the CPC until they grandfathered her in like a month ago just to validate now, it seems in retrospect, the choice for them doing so. Shontel Brown didn't believe in $15 minimum wage, Medicare for all, any of this stuff.
Okay,
last
she was
year.
a Congressional Black Caucus, but not.
She wasn't in Congress before she won.
But she was not a member of the.
Right. But she is a member of another caucus group whose name escapes me right now that is like antithetical ideologically to the CPC, like the business something that's like a conservative kind of business-minded caucus. And people are like,
how can you be?
She's a Democrat.
Okay.
She's a Democrat.
She's an electable Democrat.
Well, anybody in Cleveland is electable. It's a blue city. It's a blue district. That's not the issue. They can't claim electability.
What accounts for the antipathy to Nina Turner's candidacy in the mainstream Democratic Party?
She's a progressive.
Well, why are they against progressives?
Well, she's outspoken against the failures of the Democratic Party. She's outspoken against the failures of Joe Biden because she's advocating sincerely for the interests of working people, non-ideologically working people. So people who listen to my podcast have heard me say this a million times before, but I can chart to you a series of events that demonstrates that Joe Biden had no investment actually in passing a $15 minimum wage. And in fact, Pramila Jayapal advocated for progressives to stand down in the fight to get the $15 minimum wage included in the COVID relief bill last year. There is one party. The reason why I feel such ideological kinship to so many people across the spectrum is because my first and foremost sense of identity is with those people who have identified that there's a one-party system that's rooted in neoliberalism and maintaining a corporatized status quo that makes life very, very difficult for the majority of people living in this country. We live in the richest country in the world, and 40% of Americans could not respond to a $400 emergency. Really think about what that means. A $400 emergency, people couldn't come up with $400. 40% of the country. That was a stat from before the pandemic. God knows what it is now. And we have the longest period in American history without raising the minimum wage. It hasn't been raised since Bush. Yeah. And we're fighting over what exactly? You turn on the CNN or Tucker Carlson, they're all talking about the same dumb stuff, distracting us from these substantive issues that should be uniting us all,
Okay. I mean, in a way, you're not answering my question. I want to know, why is it that the Democratic Party, which is the relative left party in the mainstream American politics, is against these progressive ideas? They're not for the $15 minimum wage, or are they afraid they're going to lose some close elections if they don't hew to the center?
This is because Joe Biden took more money.
By the way, I'm not for the $15 minimum wage.
We can talk about that.
I should declare that, and we should talk about it. But anyway,
it's because Joe Biden took more money.
It's money
from billionaires and corporate donors than anybody else in the huge Democratic primary field. 26 candidates or whatever it was.
Okay.
And money talks. And I think normal people get that. Normal people don't think that people are giving away money for free. There's no free lunch. Right? And Joe Biden admitted this in this kind of fabulous clip of him saying, well, of course, if you give me $20,000 and you call me, I'm going to pick up your call first before other people's. And I appreciate the honesty.
Okay, so what would be wrong with this? And this is not a partisan critique. This is more like a pragmatic assessment. Okay, so like applying game theory to the political scene. How can you win? So, probably about the median voter theorem, in political science, there's this idea that the parties tend to move into the center because if I'm on the left and you're on the right, or better, I'm on the right and you're on the left, if I move in your direction, I'll get half of the people in between the two of us, and that'll expand my thing. And you want to move toward me to catch that marginal person. And we end up in the middle. And the money kind of ends up in the middle, too, because they're trying to buy both sides. They're trying to influence the people who are going to be the decision makers. It swings back and forth, the committee chairs and the, this and that. And if you're on the fringe of that and you want to change it, just decrying the fact that most of the political weight is in the center because, water runs downhill, because the center is the place where you get the most votes. The center is how you win close elections. Decrying that sounds like almost like a grandstanding move. I mean, the insiders are going to say, okay, help me get control of the majority in Congress.
So
Tell me how I'm going to do that.
I would agree with you if either party were aiming for the center.
You would agree if?
If either party were aiming for the center, or not the center, but the majority of voters, where the bulk of voters are. But that is not the case. There was this 2014 Princeton study, which gets cited a lot, for the proposition that there is absolutely no connection, like nil, none, zero, zip. No connection between the desires of the electorate and what gets enacted in Congress. There's no, if you see a graph of what the preferences are and what the bulk of people want here and there and other way, there's no relationship between that and what legislation actually gets passed. And that is because to win elections, to get the number of voters who need to turn out, it's not about convincing and persuading anybody anymore. It's about how much you can spend on these races and how much you can protect incumbents, which is why the Democratic Party is so old, which is not a problem if you're with it and happening and you're actually representing the interests of your constituents. But it is a problem when you're being grandfathered in and protected by a party so that they never have to be responsive to their constituents. And we have instances like Dianne Feinstein, who it's being reported on this week, is wandering around and bumping into walls. No disrespect. No disrespect, but she has an obligation.
Compos Mentis?
Yes. And there was reporting of her not being cognitively there before the last election. The woman, I think she was 84 during her last run. And I know Bernie. I've talked to, I obviously spent some time with Bernie. There's no cognitive deficit there. And Noam Chomsky is still kicking it, doing great at 94. This is not about ageism.
Yeah.
This is about being so invested in protecting a status quo that you'll let someone who's obviously suffering from symptoms of dementia continue to run multiple new re-election races in that condition. So I've gone a little astray. The point is, so let me give you an example of how they're not aiming for the middle. When it became clear that working people, who were the traditional base of the Democratic Party, unions, laborers, assembly line people, this kind of a thing, coming out of the New Deal. That's what happened. FDR, people loved him. They would have made him a dictator if he hadn't died, and they had to change term limits after him, right? Gave us all the social safety net. After the Depression, everybody was obviously in dire straits. Set up the basic infrastructure of contemporary American life, set a minimum wage, certain hours a week, outlawed sending little kids into fire pits to mine for coal. I don't know, whatever. Did all of those things. Social Security, extremely, still the most popular program in America, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. And unions then became huge fans of Democrats. They were Democrats because he set up the National Labor Relations Board and protected all of these labor rights. At some point, Democrats were losing and decided to go neoliberal, to throw all of that away and say, we're not going to aim for that voter. What we can do is do what Republicans have been doing for some years now. Use this newfounded thing called the television to influence people through ads. And we know that a certain amount of funding dollars translates into a certain amount of ad dollars and can influence the public in a way that we don't need the support of all of these other people. And if both parties have abandoned unions, well, the unions just have to deal with it and go with the better of the two parties, which is still the Democrats, and we still maintain power. So you get people like, I think it was Chuck Schumer who said, for every Democrat, every working class Democrat we lose in 2016, we'll pick up some soccer mom in Connecticut. And there's this idea that by targeting more affluent people, both parties are going to do this, targeting more affluent people who are guaranteed voters because rich people vote and poor people don't, that they can still maintain a status quo. And that's what's been going on. And that's how you get a scenario where even though a $15 minimum wage was on the ballot in Florida and Trump won Florida, the $15 minimum wage won with 60% of the vote. In deep red Florida, 60% of the vote as a ballot initiative. Okay? These are popular programs.
Or populist.
They are populist programs. I'm a left populist, absolutely. And I think it's a disaster and so short-sighted of Democrats to leave populism to, the likes of Tucker Carlson, who I don't think has a good faith investment in it.
Okay. So do you think Bernie could have won if he had been nominated in 2016 or in 2020?
Polls in 2016 showed that he was the most electable against Donald Trump. Hillary Clinton had an unprecedented level of unfavorables in the race. Hillary Clinton, they all knew this and said it was more important to elect Hillary Clinton than to actually beat Donald Trump, who they claimed was this existential threat, yada, yada, yada. Moreover, Hillary Clinton, the Podesta leak demonstrated to us in the emails, intentionally elevated Donald Trump as a Pied Piper candidate because she and all of her hubris believed that she was the best, that he was the best, easiest person for her to beat, right? So this entire thing is a creation of the Democratic Party. The entire Trump phenomenon was a creation of the Democratic Party.
So let me see if I'm following.